And who are we? We are the women of the fur trade. You probably haven't heard of us. That's okay. We probably haven't heard of you either.
So I was really intrigued by this play by a millennial writer. Like, it's a comedy. And I've been in Indigenous theater for most of my career. And I've done a lot of pretty heavy, pretty serious works. But Women of the Fur Trade is next generation. And it is funny. I know people are always like kind of arch one eyebrow, like really an Indigenous play that's funny, but Frances is a very clever writer. The play is full of references and pop culture references. It's anachronistic. We meet the women off the top and they're sitting in rocking chairs and they talk about being in the 18-somethings, but they're referencing Brandon Flowers of the Killers and Riel and all kinds of contemporary people. So right away, you know you're in a very different world. These three women are in the 18-somethings, but they're also in 2023.
All who have their reward on earth, the fruits of painful superstition and blind zeal, not seeking but the praise of men, here find fit retribution, empty as their deeds.
I said it first. Shut up.
You shut up.
Are we human or are we dancer?
Improper grammar.
Didn't write it.
Brandon Flowers, heterosexual lead singer of my favorite band, The Killers, and the world's second favorite Mormon after Donny Osmond.
Women of the Fur Trade is about breaking stereotypes. Part of the story is about like who gets to tell the history of this land and who gets to say what stories are foregrounded. So I think for an audience, I would encourage them to be really open to other ideas of what indigeneity is in this country. Best thing for me is for people to leave the story and go, was that true? How much of that was true? Wait, I didn't know that about Louis Riel, or I didn't know that about Thomas Scott, or I didn't know that about the Red River Rebellion. And so it sends people back to Kokum Google to check out their facts and their history. That, I think, is a huge win. And of course, comedy, I always think that when people are laughing, they throw their head back and their mouth opens, and that's when the medicine can go in. So the serious stuff is, you know, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Is that Mary Poppins? That's what I think Women of the Fur Trade is like.
The newly formed country of Canada is intent on destroying our way of life, and I must use all of my skills and all of my gumption to survive. I am like the Scarlet O'Hara of the prairies, and I will do whatever it takes to protect my people. Also, I would like to go on record and say it has always been my childhood dream to marry a Métis man and keep our culture alive.
No, it wasn't. You've always loved basic white boys.
They're just so confident for no good reason.
We're kind of revisioning history, but in a way that you're not feeling like you're hammered over the head. I think it's important as our institutions move towards being more inclusive of more voices and sort of being more representative of who our communities are. We're looking for more stories and a diversity of stories, but not just like an Indigenous story and a Black story and an Asian story, but actually we can do like a funny story and we can do a serious story and we can do a tragedy and a comedy, and all of that is true inside every community. Sam McHugh is the set designer. She gave us such an amazing playground in which to work. So that back wall is curved like the river, the Reddish River in Manitoba, where I grew up, which is why it's not a straight fort wall. It represents the fort, but it also talks about the land. And there's everything about our show was reclaimed. Like, those are all reclaimed barn boards. You know, the rocking chairs came from stock. Like, our show is the reclaim show because there's also a responsibility to the land in us as human beings and in the show. But then we use those barn boards, and Sam put this, it's like the floor of the fort is breaking down, and in the middle of the floor that's breaking down is the mulch that it goes quite deep in that space. So the actors are working on both the floorboards but also the mulch, which is like the earth that is kind of reclaiming the fort.
Merci. Oh, la bibliothèque.
Miigwech.
Oh, and a very May witch to you.
The play is called Women of the Fur Trade, and the playwright has, you know, in the stage direction, talks about there are men everywhere, men, all kinds of men with hats, men. She names a bunch of men. And so we were like, how do we do that in the tiny little studio space? Like, what real estate am I really willing to give up to a bunch of men, given that the play's called Women of the Fur Trade? And because we were doing a reclaim, recycle, repurpose production, there was a lot of frames and portraits in the storage space, in the props department, that they could pull. And so they just pulled them and hung them in the grid so that it does feel like there's men above you looking at you all the time. And it's just to remind us of like who has told these stories before. And we get to tell a counter narrative, really, to what those guys in the rafters have told us.
I don't intend to ever get married. I like being free.
Well, I can be free and be a wife at the same time.
Actually, so no.
An Indigenous worldview, everything is relational. We're all connected. Everything is connected. And so it just feels like it's less bumpy if we all recognize that we're all in relationship all the way along. For me, there is nothing else like theater, live theater, people sitting in the same room, breathing the same air, which I know, of course, we weren't allowed to do for 3 years. There's a physiological response to being in a room with a lot of people where you start to breathe together and your hearts start to go at the same kind of rhythms. We've always used theater as a way of working things out of making sense out of the chaos. How do we make meaning out of the world in which we live right now? And part of that is like looking at how we got here. How did we get here? And that's one of the things that the play is addressing. Like, what history have you been taught? What history do you think you know about this land that we share together? And because if we don't know that, how do we go forward? How do we move forward together?
Say it like a man, Thomas.
Okay. Sometimes I feel like
A real man never stutters.
Sorry.
Start again. Use your words.
Sometimes I feel like you don't respect me.
And?
That was it. That's all.